Well, good afternoon, friends and family from all over the world. I'm excited. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Zilupumlo Joka from Global Leadership Consultants, and to the people joining us across all of our social media platforms on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. A very good afternoon to all of you. Now, this afternoon, it's a very special broadcast, and I'm excited to be joined by Professor Dr. Elijah Morgan. And I think he will do a much more in-depth introduction of his background and of the work that he's been doing all over the world. But I'm very excited. Doc, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's a real privilege for us to be talking to you. And I know that the people who are tuning in and the people who will be watching this broadcast will gain so much from your insights and from your knowledge. Doc, I think let's just get straight into it. For the people maybe that have never heard of Professor Dr. Elijah Morgan or have never seen you, how would you introduce yourself to them, to those type of people?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your platform, my dear friend. It's quite an honor for me to be a part of Global Leadership Consultants. By way of introduction, I am originally from South Africa, from the lower South Coast. That's about 120 south of Durban. That's where I grew up. And at some point in time in life, I moved abroad. That was about 45 years ago. By way of academic qualifications, I'm an economist as well as a theologian. And I moved abroad first to Germany. And for the last 45 years, I've been working in the European context. My career was a majority, significant part of my career was with the United States government, the US Department of Defense, and then I've worked also with a number of companies across the board in the European context and in the USA, working as a consultant to government operations as well as multinational companies. The last 45 years, primarily based in Germany and in Switzerland. I've had the opportunity also, which is a real passion of mine, as much as I've worked with the bigger companies at the senior level and governments and other institutions. I am very passionate about entrepreneurship and leadership, and I've dealt extensively with this subject. I've been a visiting professor in various universities and also hold a chair in the Ukraine, in the oldest university there, in the faculty for economics. So that's a little bit about me. Towards the end of last year, I decided to relocate, and I'm now based in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. This is rather unusual, leaving a first world country and the comforts of Switzerland and relocating to a country like Eswatini, but I love the challenges, and there has been some very specific requests that have come to me, and I found out that being a South African at heart, there's a kind of a connection and a relationship to Eswatini. In my early years, I spent some time working here too before I left to go abroad.
Wow.
A new season in my life. I've turned 69 in September last year. So I'm actually heading for the 70s. But I'm still very enthusiastic and full of energy and have a lot of ideas in my head. So I am glad that I could join hands with Global Leadership Consultants and bring my expertise and experiences to their table.
Wow, excellent, excellent, Doc. Thank you so much for that. I know that you have a wealth of experience and you have lived and are still living life to the fullest. So I'm really interested in picking your brain. And I know for the people that are also tuning in, I do see that there are a couple of people that are watching now live on our Facebook. I know that they too, for the ones that know you and for the ones that don't know you, there's a lot that we can gain, not only I think from you, but also from the generation that is ahead that has, done so much and has experienced so much. And I think for me, this conversation that we are going to be having this afternoon is more about the insights and really getting to know how we can contribute to building a South Africa and an Africa that we want to see, obviously through imparting and impacting the younger generation of leaders that we see. So again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. I want to start with, and maybe just go back to your upbringing, Doc. I know that you have indicated that you grew up in South Africa and you've spent the past 45 years overseas. Maybe if you could just speak a little bit about your upbringing. How was your upbringing? Because a lot of people think when they see someone who is successful in inverted commas, who has achieved a lot in life and who's been blessed by God, a lot of people, fail to really understand that it's not because of like a pleasant upbringing where a person had everything. So if you could just share a bit about your upbringing and how it was growing up in apartheid South Africa, and actually what caused you to move and to spend 45 years overseas.
Well, thank you. It's an important question. I'll gladly share a bit of insight. As I said, I grew up in Port Shepstone, in a very countryside area, and we belonged, being of Indian Asian origin, we belonged to a non-privileged category of people, and my family was very, very economically challenged. We didn't have all those luxuries that kids have today. So going to school and even to high school barefoot was quite normal, and you had to struggle for your living under very challenging circumstances. I know that from the local ethnic communities that I grew up with as neighbors, the Africans, the Zulus and the Xhosas, because we were very close to what was formerly known as the homelands, the Transkei and these regions. And I know that the African ethnic communities of South Africa also suffered seriously under the old system of government. But I am thankful to God for my family because of their faith in God, and were able to motivate us, me and my siblings, not to lose hope, and to always hope and pray and do everything possible for a brighter and a better future. So my worldview has been shaped by the Judeo-Christian worldview that I grew up with in a Christian family and in a very small Christian community. And I'm thankful that I had this foundation laid in my life. So life wasn't easy. We didn't have a silver spoon in our mouth. We had to basically just live from meal to meal. And it was like the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. And that was literally the case. I remembered every morning getting up very, very early. And because of the situation in apartheid, you couldn't go and use the entrance of a shop that was reserved only for whites. I used to stand in a very long queue behind the bakery waiting to buy stale bread to bring home to my family. And if you didn't come home with that bread that day to the house, then there was no bread at home. So these were some of the challenges I went through. But what I can say is that because of my family and because of their positive attitude, I didn't lose my faith and we didn't despair. We always believe that there will be a better day in life. And so I must say today that my siblings and particularly all my nephews and nieces, they are really blessed and are very prosperous. Many of them are in very highly educated and in very good jobs. Those who have not taken the academic world and gone more into business are also very blessed and very successful. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit about my family upbringing.
Wow. Wow. Doc, I think part of what we are saying is that, your ability to keep that faith and to always be at a place where you are believing must have played such a crucial role in your upbringing and even in the person that you've become, decades later. Maybe before we go into some of your thoughts on leadership and what you think is going on in the world today, and particularly how you think, African countries can start to emerge and start to, play an important role in shaping the next generation and in sort of owning their own destiny. I just want to spend some time talking about your spirituality, and I know that you are a Christian, you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. How has that, or rather, let me ask like this, what role has that played in molding and in creating the person that you are outside of the traditional walls of church and preaching and all of that? I'm not sure if that question makes any sense, but within the context of what you're doing in the world and the value that you're adding to, and the value that and the impact that you've made to so many companies internationally, how important is it, or how important was it for you, or how important has it been for you to have the belief system that you have currently, and what role has that played in molding the person that you are currently?
Well, thank you. That's great questions, very focused questions. What I want to say is that the Christian faith has protected, because I embraced it in all sincerity, it has prevented me from becoming a bitter and unhappy person full of resentment to white superiority and lack of motivation and a kind of a hopeless feeling in my mind and in my spirit. But my Christian faith helped me to always deal with negative factors in society, to process them and to put them under my feet. So my faith in God, this part of my life, the spirituality of life, has given me a very strong foundation in my life. It has also become my compass, my navigation system. We realize today that it's almost, we are so used to smart gadgets. Today, driving your car with the navigation system, we really need a compass. We need this faith inside us that will help us to navigate through crises and find our way through all the turmoils and the negativity that's around us. The world around us is not getting brighter by the day, it's getting very gloomy.
Yeah.
And so our spirits have to have light and sunshine and radius to keep us going. And I found out that, many people at the outset have thought, well, you have embraced two very controversial, contradicting fields. You're a theologian first, and then you're also an economist. Aren't these two positions in conflict with each other? But as I've gone along, I found out this was the very mix that is missing in society. Society, if it's all business and no spirituality, it is a house without a firm foundation. And I have found that this combination has opened, by my experience, so many doors for me that this aspect of my life, the spirituality, being a theologian, was welcomed and treated with as a priority in companies today, multinational companies, where I have been asked about how can the leadership challenges be dealt with spiritually. Now, this is rather amazing. There are big name companies that have made a very focused approach on this. So I want to say today that what in my analysis and what I've seen is that the growing generation, not only in South Africa, but we're talking now about South Africa, that's the country of our focus, are very discouraged. Many of them are also very depressed. And the statistics provided by WHO tells us that depression is the number one disease among the young generation globally. And it is very often leading them to a very dangerous lifestyle of drugs and alcohol and whatever. I'm not saying that everybody's affected, everybody has the problem, but the whole of society is affected by it. And if I'm surrounded by people that are depressed, I need to really struggle to keep my motivation. So there's got to be something inside me that keeps me alive and keeps me going. So my faith has been very crucial. But and I've been asked specifically by companies to speak about subjects like the spirituality of business, the spirituality of life. How do we live with all of these challenges and not break down and lose our strength and energy to keep going? So to me, I think all the factors that it takes to make you successful in life, like academic education and what all the other ingredients that go together. But I believe one of the strongest ingredients is our spiritual life.
No, definitely. No, definitely. And I think that a lot of times we tend to live in a divided state, in that we think that which is spiritual only must operate within certain confines, and it must be treated in a particular way. It's only for Sunday, and that which is, in inverted commas, not spiritual, must be treated in a particular way. And what I love about what you're saying is that you have managed to fuse, your belief system, your spirituality with the work that we do, which is something that not a lot of people can do. And I think a lot of people have a mindset of, on a Sunday, on a weekend, or when they go and attend whatever religious gathering, that they put on a spiritual hat, and then when they go to work, it's totally something different. So I think it's very interesting hearing you speak about the merging and the fusion of your economic, academic, inclination and background, and your spiritual, theological, skill set. I think that's very interesting. But Doc, my second last question, maybe before I take some of the questions that are coming in, and those of you who are joining in, we are in conversation with Professor Dr. Elijah Morgan, and we are talking about leadership, and we have a very great announcement to make at the end of this broadcast, which Dr. Elijah has alluded to. But we are talking about leadership and entrepreneurship, and we are getting some insights and thoughts from a person that has lived as of 2022 for 70 years and that has experienced so much. So my next question, Doc, would then be, in terms of leadership, I'm very interested to hear what you think when you switch on the television and when you see what is going on in the world currently. If we look at what's going on, maybe let's zoom in into South Africa. When you look at what's happening in South Africa, what are the impressions that you get from a leadership perspective, and what do you see?
Thank you, Joka. What I do see, the very important and challenging question about leadership is, and in my analysis, because I have a thorough understanding about what's going on in South Africa and African countries, but because of having been assimilated into the European culture and the European way of life, I have an excellent understanding of the European mindset or the Western mindset. The first thing that is very clear to me, the first problem with leadership on the African continent, with African countries, is that most leaders, I say now, not all, but most leaders feel coming into a leadership position is a position that gives them the liberty to self-entitlement. And if it is not given, if privileges like of material possessions is not given to them, if the salary they make doesn't satisfy them, then they believe it is their right to take and to accumulate as much wealth as possible, even if it's not going to do them any good living in posh houses and having half a dozen luxury vehicles. That this horrible disease that's crippling African leaders is the greed in taking away and draining from their countries their resources, and most often by using very corrupt methods to do this. So a person here in an African context, very often, and I repeat, it's not all, in a senior position like a CEO or the managing director of a company or a senior manager, they are often looking for ways in which they can enrich themselves, and even do it using questionable methods to do this. So leadership, as we know, we say it's all about serving. And we couldn't have a better, greater example of one of the most greatest statesmen that has lived in our days, Nelson Mandela, how this man lived a selfless life to serve the nation, his nation. And the tragedy is that people don't see him as an example. And this is causing a lot of damages and crippling the society from moving forward. I'm not saying there is no corruption in Europe and the USA. I mean, it's always on the news, whatever is going on. But what I find that senior leaders in the European context, the majority of them understand they are there to serve and not there for self-entitlement. So this is one of the first very clear weaknesses I see with leadership within the African context, serving themselves and not the people that they have been put into a particular position to serve.
What would the solution be, Doc? I mean, I'm asking them that because I think, in a lot of circles that I'm in and in the work that we're doing as a leadership development firm with a strong focus on young people, we would always say that, we all know what is wrong in society, and we spend a lot of our time talking about the misfortunes and pointing out the faults of the government or whatever is those people that have been entrusted to lead us. So I think there are very few people, and I think you are part of the people that have always spoken about solutions and have always had a solution-centered approach to leadership. But for the benefit of the people that are hearing you for the first time, you're pointing out this one of the greatest, misfortunes and challenges of African leaders, which you say is, that inclination of always wanting to serve themselves. But how can we solve this? Because I think this cuts across so many different fields. This isn't something you find in societies, you find this in schools, you find it in companies, as you have said, you find it all across society. And it's almost like it's a disease that is growing, wherever you go. So what, in your perspective, what is the solution to some of these challenges, particularly this one of having leaders in society that are always overly concerned about self? How do we solve this problem?
We cannot. Thank you, Joka. That's a brilliant question. We cannot solve that problem from the outside. When I say from the outside, I'm saying we cannot just implement, although we have excellent systems and structures throughout the countries, structures for governance, for leadership, for management, for whatever. But we understand today that this is not a structural problem. It is a problem that has to deal with the heart, that goes to the heart of man. And if the heart of man is wicked and evil, management wouldn't be good. At some point in time, it would reveal itself. This is why, together with leaders from across the world in very senior positions, we intensively deal with the subject of personal integrity, your lifestyle, your faith, your spirituality, because these are the qualities that are needed to take our economy and our people forward. If a leader lacks integrity and is weak in character, then this leader will be very poor in taking us economically, politically, and morally forward, because in the inside they are basically, corrupt. So having strong character is necessary for success. And without being persons of integrity, in my evaluation across the board, globally, and looking at South Africa, without integrity, success is just an empty shell.
Wow.
So my first and foremost advice, this is not, earlier on, Joka, you mentioned, the problem with which has been caused by a clergy, and I'm a clergyman myself, not just a man as a PhD in economics. But one of the problems has been created by the clergy also, is that, we've kept the church as the church and the world as the world. Anything that is secular is not spiritual, and going to church on Sundays and singing songs and worshiping God, that's spiritual. But the Bible doesn't know this dichotomy. So in one way, the clergy is responsible for having created a dichotomy in society, and the church is not, at large, is not really interested in the problems that go on outside the walls of the church, because they are so obsessed with themselves, as well as many church leaders, self-obsession. So to me, we need to develop a spiritual culture. And by saying a spiritual culture, we have to hold ourselves as leaders accountable to a higher power. Now, I am, as I said, a believer in Christ, and I'm a clergyman, but I have great friends who are Muslim and who are Hindus, and yet they live their lives accountable to a higher being, to God as they understand Him to be. And I found no conflict between me and them, because these people live not above law and above God, but they learn to live their lives in submission to God and the prevailing laws of a nation. So to me, spirituality for any young person who wants to make a headway in life is the most crucial element. Without it, we will constantly run into walls and defeat ourselves.
Wow. Wow. I think we've got quite a number of comments that are coming in from all of our platforms, people asking questions and people commenting. And maybe we'll take one in the next few minutes, one question from Facebook. So I just want to encourage you, friends, if you're tuning in on Facebook, to share this broadcast and to ask your questions in the comment section. If you're on YouTube, to ask your questions in the comment section on our YouTube page, and so that we can let Dr. Elijah know what that question is, and so that he can answer that. Doc, I think this is so profound, and I think for me, there are not enough conversations that offer solutions in the various platforms that exist in society. I think all of the questions that we have are questions that are always breaking down, that are always criticizing, but not a lot of people have the heart of offering solutions. And I think even for me, for the better part of last year, that was one of the things that was so burning like in my spirit. It was how, particularly the church, but also how people generally, young people, old people, poor people, rich people, how we can mobilize society to start to think of what role and what part they can play, instead of always being in a position of expecting and criticizing. So my final question to you, Doc, and I think this is a simple one, would then be, what is leadership? And I think this is such a simple but yet such an important question, because I feel like there's such a huge misconception, politically, religiously, socially, academically. Not a lot of people know exactly what leadership is. And I think you touched on something very important and something that's always been in my heart. You spoke about the condition of the heart, and how some of the issues that we have in society are not as a result of anything else but the condition of a wicked, evil heart in society. And so my question to you, Doc, would then be, in your perspective, you've engaged with so many companies, you've had a great, and you're still having a great life and you've been in, rooms that some people can only think of, and have spoken to people that are considered to be top people in the world. How would you describe leadership in a simple way that would make sense to a young person who's in a rural area, who wants to start to enact or grow in his or her ability in understanding what leadership is?
First of all, I want to say that leadership is something that has been entrusted to a person to take people into their destiny. If you don't know what their destiny is, we can't take them there.
Sure.
I want to say again, just to repeat this, because it's a very loaded statement. Leadership is entrusted to us, like power that is entrusted to us, whether it is in a company or an institution, to take people who follow us, whom we're supposed to lead, into their destiny. So if we don't know what their destiny is, how can we take them there? And when I say their destiny, I mean, what are they heading for in life? What they are heading for is a life that's successful, a life that is financially prosperous, a life that has good social structures, a life that's meaningful. And these are the all the components of the destiny of an individual. So as I have been in various positions of very senior leadership, I realize that I have a responsibility to take people into their destiny, to lead them, to show them the way. And if I don't know what their destiny is, because I'm so blinded by greed and my own selfish ambitions, I can't take people into their destiny if I am blinded. Well, as Jesus said, the blind can't lead the blind. But coming back to what leadership is all about to me, is leadership is taking the people who have been entrusted to me into their destiny. And their destiny has major components of blessings, success, success as an entrepreneur, success in business, living successful social lives. And these are some of the elements that make up the destiny of individuals. So people want to have a fulfilled life. They want to have a feeling that they are pursuing what is their destiny and not just basically living their lives to be able to pay debts. This is not the real purpose of life.
Sure. That is such a good statement. There's a question or a comment from Kaya, and I'll just like us to take that question and to then wrap this conversation up. Time flies. Time is just flying. So Kaya Ndovana, and I'll just put that on a screen for you to see. So Kaya is saying, looking at what's happening in South Africa, would you say we have a leadership crisis, and what can the young generation do to empower themselves to move the country to the right direction? And I think you've already spoken about this in parts, but maybe you can just elaborate more on this. So Kaya's asking, would you say we have a leadership crisis in South Africa? And in terms of the young generation, what can young people do to empower themselves so that they can have a meaningful contribution that will move the country to the right direction?
I think this is a very crucial question, Kaya Kando. Thank you for asking this question. Yes, you are precisely right in your analysis. The first part of your question, looking at what's happening in South Africa, and I would say South Africa is in a very grave leadership crisis. I won't even call it a crisis, it's a leadership vacuum. And leadership is operating out of a vacuum. And because of this leadership crisis, the overall global level of leadership in the country is not functioning the way it should. So we need to build rapidly very good relationships. The more relationships we build, the better. Looking at the example of a net, a small net that's the size of your hand can't net big fish. So a bigger net can fish much fish. So we need to build a network of a young generation that is very strongly motivated by principles of spirituality, integrity, love, trust. These are trust is not a commodity that we could go out and buy. Trust has got to be built, it's got to be earned. So I believe that the young generation has a critical responsibility of teaming up together with like-minded young generation across the board and say, what are the values that we are going to live by? How can we create platforms to promote these values and begin to be a positive contributing factor in the South African society? I think it's very important for young people not to be just focused on entrepreneurship and their business, but also to look at the broader picture and begin to gain traction by joining with like-minded young people and saying, how can we get together to build a better and brighter South Africa? So I think this is where the focus of the young generation should be. Not just on themselves as an individual, but also collectively. How could we form relationships? What kind of platforms can we offer to build these relationships so that we could say there is a bright young generation emerging that are not only entrepreneurs in various fields, but they have tremendous spiritual qualities that will have a very strong impact and that will have a strong voice in the society we are in, that is seriously sick without a remedy.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Doc. I'm tempted to just take one more question. And there's one question that has come in from East London, from Uluyolo Nizwa. And I'll just also maybe put that on the screen. It's quite a lengthy one. Yeah. So Luyolo, Doc is asking, firstly, at a personal level, he would like to know what practical points can you share through which you have been trying to create the climate at which Christianity is not just a matter of meeting on Sundays and singing and preaching as you have described, but rather of being the influence in our surrounding. So I think the first question is, what practical things can you share of breaking that divide between the Sundays and during the week? And then his second question is, Christianity in its teachings, it has an element of exclusivity, as it also encourages involvement in the world as light and salt. So how do we ensure, how do we ensure, I think I've lost his other writings there, but maybe you can try and answer that first question, Doc.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's a brilliant question coming from one of our viewers there in East London. What I could do at the personal level and what I have been doing is that I have been involved in a number of platforms. These are not platforms that are out in the limelights. These are platforms that are built based on relationships. And at the very personal level, I've been involved in a number of platforms. For example, there's the one platform that I've closely worked with and was a co-founder called Leaders Integrity Foundation. It's only working primarily in Switzerland, and it has been a very attractive platform for people to come together and talk about issues of how to develop their faith, how to contribute to each other's lives, to develop a lifestyle of integrity. So I have to start with myself. If I'm a part of a platform, I have to look at myself. Where are the deficits in my own life? And the Christian faith is not a faith that excludes business, contrary to what many people think. The Bible has a lot to say about how we conduct our lives in society and how we do business. So personally, I believe get involved with on platforms that promote the fact that Christianity is not just a religion. Regretfully, that's the way it's handled, but it's a way of life. And how can this way of life promote a good and healthy climate in business and in institutions? So I personally am involved in such foundations, And I encourage everybody, if you don't find a foundation and a platform to get involved in, to start a platform, to say, how can we create a platform for integrity in society, in business, and link that also with being a fundamental part of my lifestyle, being a Christian? And that church, whether in church or outside of church, look at life more holistically. I think that by doing this, we can become a very strong factor for influence. I think that question also referred to light and salt. Both light and salt are very powerful elements. I don't need to talk about that. We all know about it. And I think, the more we create platforms and build strong relationships with the same purpose and embrace the same values, we can start becoming a very positive factor of influence in our community, in the smallest sphere that we are in. And then the circles grow bigger and bigger to the national level and to the global community.
Yes, no, definitely, definitely. I hope, Mr. Liolo, your question has been answered by Doc. You're more than welcome to maybe write some of your other questions, and when Doc maybe has the chance, or maybe we can send you some of those questions, Doc,
Yes.
that are coming in, so that maybe you can deal with them next time. But Doc, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing these insights. I think these are pearls, and these are such jewels and words that must be treasured. And not only treasured, these are statements that are loaded, that must still be unpacked and and applied to our lives and to our businesses and to the various sectors that we find ourselves in. I think the purpose of the broadcast was to just make an announcement, and the announcement is, friends of Global Leadership Consultants, that Professor Dr. Elijah Morgan has now officially been appointed to the role of an advisory director, a non-executive director at Global Leadership Consultants. And we are very excited and are very privileged to have him, a person of his stature, a person of his caliber, playing a role in the work that we're doing. And our work has always been about imparting and training and impacting the next generation of leaders. And that's one of the things that when we started Global Leadership Consultants, that we were clear about. We always wanted to build a vehicle that would play an important role in society, but particularly that would ask critical questions, and that would enable the younger generation of leaders to come up and emerge with a different mindset, a mindset of serving, a mindset of critical thinking, and a mindset of leading from the heart and leading from who they are, rather than leading from what they know and what they can do, but really leading from the innermost parts of their being. And for me, I think that's one of the things that I think God has enabled and has called us to do through the various organizations that we are forming. And so it's a real privilege to have you, Professor Dr. Elijah Morgan, being part of Global Leadership Consultants. We're really looking forward to the role that you're going to play. And we are very, very privileged and very, very excited. Do you perhaps have any thoughts to share with the people, any parting thoughts to share with the people that are tuning in?
I just want to leave you with a very simple statement. With regards to everything that we've discussed, one thing is very crucial and critical. We need change. And I think we all agree. So the statement I want to leave you with, to say, I am the change. Very simple. Just embrace this statement. I am the change.
Wow, I am the change. And I think that's definitely something that everyone who's watching can identify with, that we must be the change that we want to see, and we must start to action out the things that we are speaking about. Well, thank you so much, Doc. Thank you for your time. Thank you to all of our viewers and our followers who have tuned in and who have been asking questions. There are so many comments that have come in that I cannot get to. We've got to Pastor Tando Melana from Cape Town, who are saying this is such a profound conversation. We've got Dr. AMC in Swaziland, who also is saying that we are the salt of the world and not the salt of the church. I think that's such also something profound that we can all think about.
Yes.
We've got someone, Sadika, saying from Port Elizabeth, saying, I love the statement, lead from the heart, not leading from what you know and what you can do. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. And I especially want to thank you, Dr. Elijah, for your time and for having the heart that you have, a heart for the next generation. I really believe that, especially this year, that God is going to do something great, and that through this partnership and through having you on board in this organization, we are going to reach new heights. So thank you so much, Doc, and thank you, friends, for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Lupumlo.